there are other checks that you do that include even more parentheses. So in that case, public key code. So for a key code, that is, oops, I didn't actually put in the variable called press. So a key code is input. This could be a mouse press, this could be a keyboard. So let's just go over to here and we'll just use A. So if, again, the first parenthesis, key code, input dot key code not key code, excuse me. You have to choose the type of key press, like are you looking for any key, or are you looking for when the key gets pressed down or when the key is let up? So let's do get key up. So you press the key and you let go. Now this is what I was getting at. This in and of itself also has its own parentheses in it, because you have to check which get key while you're doing it for the press variable. So I'm only checking one thing, and yet there's still not extra, but there's still a second set of parentheses because this itself requires another set of parentheses. So you can imagine that if you're mixing this with something like this, it gets real crazy. And again, that's kind of the reason why I wanted to do this. So we'll save that. And now it's the key press that should change the color. So it was the letter A. So I'm holding A down, nothing's happening, but when I let go, it changes because it's get key up. Why would you do get key up? Because you don't want it to be rapid fire. Because if you're doing get key down, as long as the key is down, it keeps returning a true value. Alright, so say you want to do a calculation. So the whole thing, you're checking more than one, so the whole thing gets its parentheses. It's an and, so the double ampersand. And now the calculation. So say it's A plus, A plus B plus C. Now here's the tricky part. The calculation itself needs to be in parentheses. And then this part needs to be in parentheses. Actually, this won't be true, so let's make it -1 because they're all sitting at 0. So if them combined are greater than -1 and I press and let go of the A key, it'll turn red. And sure enough, it worked. So like I said, depending on how many things you're checking, this gets really crazy, but particularly if you can get this one where you're checking and plus and or, and this one, I do a lot with checking inputs and other conditions. I just also threw in a calculation just to make it a little bit more complicated because it requires the extra parentheses. So a couple quick notes and then that should wrap this up. First of all, best practice is really to surround your whatever you want to get performed, if the if statement is true, should always have brackets. It will technically, as you've seen, it works when it's only a single line, but if there was like a second line that I wanted to be performed, that second line would always be performed. So say, let's just do something quick. get component, and let's do transform, and let's do local scale. So this is going to change the size. So new vector 3, and we'll do fraction. So we do 0.5. Got to add an F since it's a fraction, or a decimal. 0.5 F, and we'll just keep it at 1 for the Z. Okay. So with the brackets, you're saying, okay, don't just change the color, you also want to change the size. So let's save it and watch that run. Changed color and shrunk. Now watch what happens if you get rid of the brackets. It already shrunk. So best practice, always have those brackets from the very beginning. Because as you can see, it makes all the difference in the world. It's not the same. You're actually telling the system to do two entirely different things. And the last thing that I want to mention is that you can also look for, and this really applies really to the input statement, you can look for it not happening. And so what that would be, one of the ways I would think you'd use that is, say you press a button in a certain direction and it gives your character velocity in that direction. Well, you may want to have a statement that says, okay, if you're not pressing in any direction, then cease all velocity. So basically it's a catch-all to make sure that your character isn't drifting in the wrong direction. And the way that would look would be if, and you just put an exclamation point, so basically the exclamation point is not, literally means not, so this input is not happening. So just the opposite would be occurring, that if it's not happening, then do that. And this is something else we haven't looked at, was the else statement. And the else would do, say, back to white. So actually we're kind of reversing what we're normally doing. We're saying, okay, always be red. And now we just need the semicolons at the end. As far as how the brackets would look, the brackets would be surrounding everything before the else. You don't have to line the brackets up like this. I just do it because it makes more sense to me, helps me troubleshoot. So this is saying, and we have to remark this out. So this is saying if this input, if we're not getting key up on this, then turn red, which means it's red except for the moment you get the key up. Else, so in other words, in this case, the else is a positive, that if this is happening, then go to white. See, it's red because we're not getting the key up. And then when we get the key up, you see that it very briefly flashed, which makes sense because, again, the get key up is just that, the single frame that the key is up. So this one's a kind of an odd case, but as you can see, you can check for something not happening. So it's not just a matter of checking for something happening, it's checking for something not happening. And like I said, an example of why you would check for something not happening would be you want a cessation of movement, or maybe another thing is, say someone heals when they're not moving. A lot of first-person shooters have you heal even when you're moving, but maybe a requirement is for you to be standing still. And so this would check to see that you're not moving, and then that way your character would start to heal. So that should about do it. I hope this has been helpful. We looked at an increasingly complex amount of if statements, and threw in the negatives at the end, the brackets, and the else. But like I said, best practice is always to be using those brackets, because you never know when your application is going to grow, you're going to expand functionality. If you don't have those brackets there, as I demonstrated, it's two entirely different things you're telling the system to do if you don't have it surrounded in the brackets. So that should do it then.